Mr. Helmer for 3 minutes.
Madam President, the committee's amendments urge the EU to introduce a common consolidated corporate tax base. This is clearly intended as a move towards a harmonised corporate tax rate. Now, in a free market context, Madam President, competition is always a good thing, and tax competition between jurisdictions is always and everywhere a good thing. Any attempt by governments to harmonise taxes is a conspiracy by those governments against the interests of taxpayers. The effect of such tax harmonisation is always to increase taxes, to reduce the competitiveness, in this case, of European economies, and ultimately it is the individual consumer who pays more because these costs are simply passed on. Countries with high tax economies like socialist France cannot compete with countries which have lower corporate tax rates, such as Ireland. The EU's solution is to destroy globally competitive business environments because it envies them. If countries like Britain want to have a globally competitive environment in which to create business, jobs and wealth, then we must leave an EU which is intent on harmonising taxes. Not only that, but in the EU, the state is to be given more weapons with which to intimidate ordinary taxpayers. General rules against tax avoidance, as proposed today by the Commission, will be difficult to interpret and will consequently give the state a large stick with which to threaten the ordinary taxpayer. These rules will not be used against large corporates, as is claimed. They will be used by the state against those who cannot afford expensive lawyers. It would be better to simplify the tax system so that the taxpayer could be certain of his or her tax liability, rather than add a layer of complexity with anti-avoidance rules which will scare ordinary people away from making sensible investments for the future and into paying more tax than they need to do today. We are also being asked to endorse the committee's proposal for an EU tax identification number. Now, clearly the EU is too scared of British public opinion to tell us before our EU referendum, but we can put the pieces of the jigsaw together. The EU wants to tax us directly if we are daft enough to remain. The report recommends an EU-wide withholding tax and an EU exit tax, added to which are proposals in committee for a global register of assets held by individuals. Put these things together and you have the necessary building blocks for a wealth tax on citizens. The prospect of a financial transaction tax is also being discussed in working documents aimed at creating a Eurozone budget. And not content with just its own budget, the Eurozone wants to use the EU's general budget as a means to keep the euro on life support. We know this actually from David Cameron's so-called renegotiation, which attempts to protect the British economy from these costs, but will fail to do so. May I end, Madam President, on a positive note. We in Britain are about to vote, if the polls are to be believed, are about to vote to leave the European Union, so we shall not be troubled by these problems. We will happily leave you to cope with the problems of your own creation.
Mr. Helmer, I'm afraid you do have to wrap it up, even if it's on a positive note. Mr. Lamberts would like to put a question to you. Can you accept?
Mr. Helmer, you are right. Tax competition is a good thing. The question is, for whom? For whom? For the shareholders of the large companies. But probably not such a good thing for the small taxpayers, individuals and SMEs, who end up then bearing the brunt of financing public services. And that means that, well, unless, of course, you want to get rid of education, NHS and all the rest of it, then someone has to pay for it. And the name of the game today is tax injustice. And basically what you defend with your positions is even more tax injustice, so that the little man pays and the big man gets away with it in the tax havens that you so well defend.
Well, of course, that is the sort of nonsense we expect from the left. The fact is that if you leave politicians to their own devices, they will simply keep increasing and increasing and increasing rates of taxation, and the result of that will actually be that they damage the economy, they kill the goose that lays the golden egg, and they collect less tax. If I can get one message out into this chamber today, it is that raising tax rates does not increase revenues beyond a certain reasonable limit. And if you have tax rates which are too high and you then increase them, you reduce the revenues, you have less money for the education and the health and all those good things that you want. Your policy is utterly self-destructive.
Mr. Helmer, I'm afraid you have to stop now.
C'est bon. Monsieur Lamberts, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Lamberts, please keep calm. Mr. Lamberts, please.